Yo, what's up, everybody? How you doing? This is your Coach Renz, and I want to thank you for joining me right now. So, what we're going to talk about today? Well, today is a video that I'm not going to give you what you should do based on this video. I'm going to try not to. I'm going to give you a little bit, but I'm going to try not to. I want you to think about this. I want you to contemplate this. And this, although centered around black people, centered around those who ancestry experienced the African slave trade, this actually is a message for everybody to focus on, for everybody to take something from. So I hope that everybody listens to this video to gain a better understanding and not just look at the third dimensional level of race when it comes to this, but to look beyond that, to look deeper into it, to actually use the trivium, which is knowledge, facts, utilizing those facts, that knowledge, into an understanding, into a logic, and then utilizing that logic to make your life better and becoming wise, having wisdom. So let's do that in this lesson. Now, thank you, everyone. I have much gratitude for everyone who supports this channel through Patreon, through ordering from Uncle Renz Popcorn, through being a client of mine with Coach Renz. I thank everybody for that and for subscribing. Hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Come on over to the YouTube channel and let's get that subscription going. Let's get it going so you get notified and hit the bell icon. So the question is, what does the slave Bible, the transatlantic slave trade, what is its connection to the 1804 Haitian Revolution? Now, as I was growing up in class in school, those connections were never made. As a matter of fact, in school, there was never any teachings about the 1804 revolution. That was something that I learned later on. And it wasn't something that anyone, from my knowledge, had knowledge of as I was growing up. So the question is, why weren't we taught this? That's one question. Some people say, well, you grew up in America, you didn't grow up in Haiti, so why would you learn that? Well, we learned about all these other things in European history. We learned all these other things about Europeans doing this and doing that, so we should have learned about this as well. But of course, we know the type of society that we grew up in here in America and in most Western cultures. If the Western culture, if the European culture wasn't the beneficiary of it, then it wasn't something that was necessarily taught. And the 1804 revolution certainly throughout history cannot have been taught. And we're going to discuss why and how it wasn't taught, and a couple of events that were affected by it, how they were affected by it. Now, I know many of you may want to get into the slave Bible. That's going to be towards the end of this video. That's going to be the second half, I should say. But the first half, we're going to discuss the transatlantic slave trade. And before we go any deeper into the transatlantic slave trade, let me go ahead and for those who claim that they have no part in it, that their people, ancestry were already here in America and they were already black and that sort of thing. Well, if that's what you believe, that's fine. If you believe that a transatlantic slave trade never happened, I'm going to give you a few things that will make you have to say, unless you ignore fact, that it did happen and that you may be, like me, a mixture of both. I have family members who are native to America, and yet I have family members who came across on the transatlantic slave trade. I don't deny neither because they're both vital to my history, both vital to my understanding of how things happen and how my family came about. So I don't ignore either. And if you are of the enlightened mind, then you can't ignore either. You have to look at both. Unless you know your perfect family genealogy, you cannot disclaim one over the other, or claim one over the other. Let me not say disclaim. So, got my notes here. One of the things we first want to look at is that we know that the Haitian Revolution happened in 1804. What's important about that is that what happened 3 years later. You gotta understand, they didn't have the internet. They didn't even have our U.S. Postal Service and how we get mail, from one country to another country within a matter of days. What they had was the super snail mail. A ship had to carry information across the Atlantic to get news. Something that you may have happened, you may not find out for a month. You're living something. The 1804 revolution happens. The victors, who won, how it went down. When it was over, the people in Europe didn't know about it for months after it happened. The people in America. It took weeks for it just to get to America, and took weeks and weeks and months for it to spread. So it wasn't like news traveled quickly. So the reason why these things happen 3 years later, and there's a reason why these things happen. That's the reason why these things happen 3 years later. So what was significant 3 years later? Two things happened. We're going to discuss both. The first thing we're going to discuss is that in 1807, the British Empire and America outlawed the transatlantic slave trade. That no more will ships be allowed to transport people from West Africa or any other part of Africa over to America, to what would become the United States of America, the 13 colonies, nor would they be able to transport slaves to anywhere in the British colonies, right? So the British Empire outlawed it, America outlawed it. And another thing that happened in 1807 is what we have best knowledge of is the creation of the slave Bible. And that slave Bible was only, now let me dispel something that many people in America that I've seen on many YouTube videos and Facebook comments have been making. The slave Bible wasn't distributed in America, in the 13 colonies. The slave Bible was only distributed, well, it wasn't 13 colonies in 1807, it was America by then. So it was distributed in America. It was only distributed in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, places like that. It wasn't something that was distributed in America. Could some of them have gotten to America? Sure. But as far as it being widely distributed, no, it wasn't. It wasn't widely distributed. But there was a reason why 1807 the slave Bible was created, and it was focused in those areas. And there's a reason why it's connected to the transatlantic slave trade. Going to make the connection in just a few minutes. But let me give you a couple more information about the British Empire during that time frame and what happened. I do want to add in there that the British Empire later on in 1833, they outlawed slavery, period. And if you were under the age of 6, you were just set free immediately, which is kind of weird. But if you were over the age of 6, you had to work for free, worked as a slave again for the next 4 years, and then you were set free, which was about 800,000 people were set free at that point. But it's weird that you would set the children free, but yet the slaves weren't, the parents weren't. You know, it's kind of a messed up situation, because then the children really aren't free because they're still right there, you know. So they utilize the children to still keep the parents from acting too foolish over these next 4 years, with the promise that they'll be able to have their children be with their children in 4 years after they finish working out this final slavery, the final 4 years of slavery. Also, it gave all those who own slaves 4 years to prepare themselves financially to be able to handle a life without slaves, to figure out how they're going to do their sharecropping or whatever it is that their plans were. So it gave the people in the British Empire 4 years to figure it out, so that they still maintain their financial positions. I'm sure the elite class appreciated that tremendously, to have 4 more years of slavery. But this is what happened. And then in 1806, you had the last slave ship come to America. The last known slave ship came to America in 1860. I said 1806, I meant 1860. 1860, to the shores of Alabama, up near the Mobile area, you had the final slave ship. And on that ship, and this is for my people who are tending to argue about all black people are from are naturally born in America. This is proof. They say, where are the ships? Well, this ship was burned because the people, so you had an Alabama plantation owner who waged a bet that he could sneak some slaves into America. So he had a ship that came off the coast of Benin, brought some slaves over, burned the ship. Some archaeologists have recently, last year, said they think that they may have found that ship, burned the ship, and then, had their slaves. Sold those slaves. Took a few months for them to sell those slaves, but they sold them. And then, of course, we know in 1864, you had the Civil War ending, and those slaves were then freed. But in the 1930s, there was an interview of one of the slaves from that ship who discussed it. The manuscript wasn't published because people didn't like it. They didn't like the fact that the author used some of the broken English and the slave kind of vernacular from that time frame. So they didn't like it. They thought it was dehumanizing, embarrassing. So it was never really published too deeply. But an interview for that final cruise, that final slave cruise, was published in the 1930s. Well, was found. A manuscript was written, and an interview was done in the 1930s. But it discussed that. So we can claim that it didn't happen, but it did. So get over it. And just accept both. That's what I say, accept both. I just accept facts. What we can see and what we can't see. Now, here's the thing. What's significant about that? Why would 1804 Haitian Revolution cause the British Empire and the American Empire to outlaw the transatlantic slave trade? Well, here's the thing. The 1804 revolution proved that slaves can revolt against against their oppressors and win. And if you continuously bring more and more and more over, then they still may revolt. Now, there's some significance about this 1804 revolution that I have to get into the Bible, the slave Bible, to really fully get you into an understanding of it. And here it is. In 1807, there was a Bible that was written. It's called the Slave Bible. It's on display right now in D.C. It belongs to Fitz University, I believe. It's on loan. The thing about it, and there's two that they know that they have. What's significant about this Slave Bible is that 90% of the Old Testament is not in it, and about 50% of the New Testament is not in it. What is significant about this heavily redacted book being given to slaves? Those especially in the Caribbean. Well, since 1804 slave revolt happened, they didn't want anything to promote revolution of the slaves. And if they gave a full Bible to the slaves, they may find passages that incite them to revolt. Now, of course, every article that I found that would talk about this mainly talked about one subject matter, but at the end, after I tell you their part, I'm gonna give you the real part, right? The real part that I think they were really trying to hide, okay? And that truly is connected to the 1804 Haitian Revolution. And that is this. In every part that was taken away, there were things like Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers, then going to Egypt, then being betrayed by Potiphar's wife, then going to jail, and then becoming one of the chief guys of the Egyptian ruling class. That story was left in there. Why? Well, that story tells you of someone who was sold into slavery, accepted his life of slavery, and looked for opportunities within the system of slavery that he was in for a better day later, for a greater outcome within, but still being a slave. So that type of message is okay. It left in New Testament items like slaves, serve your masters, whether they are good or bad, as you would serve Christ, and that you would get your heaven later. It left in verses like that. You guys can comment on those down below as to what you think about those. I know many people will say slavery is not in the Bible, God didn't condone slavery, that it was indentured servitude. Well, that's not necessarily true, not even by a long shot. Here's the thing about that, and let's go ahead and quell that argument right now. If you go and find Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, it basically tells you that of the foreign nations, see, although there's a part that says any man who goes in and kidnaps another man and into slavery and steals another man, that person is an abomination, they're sinning, and that's not allowable by God. They're talking about Hebrew to Hebrew, Hebrew to Hebrew, Israelite to Israelite. When it talks about 7 years of indentured servitude, they're talking about Hebrew to Hebrew and giving them freedom at the end. That's Hebrew to Hebrew. That's Israelite to Israelite. But in Leviticus 25, it specifically says you can go and make slaves of foreigners, of foreign nations that you conquer. You can specifically make slaves of people, of foreigners who live in your midst. And you can, and it tells you specifically, you can pass them, they can make them slaves for a lifetime and pass them down to your sons. It says this specifically. It also says specifically in Exodus 21 that if you beat your slave to the point where they can't get up, then you are to be punished. But if you beat your slave and they can get up after 2 days, then you're not punished as a slave master, because your slave is as to you as money. So it's very specific in giving out the rules of slavery and saying that really there is no slavery when it comes to Hebrew to Hebrew, but making slaves of other nations is okay. That's good. That's condoned. That's why exactly in the New Testament it still says slaves be good to you. Slaves follow the will of your masters, whether they're cruel or not. All that, it still says it. And I know some people will say that, well, it also says that in Christ there's no free man, no bondman, no male, no female. It says all those. But those were left out of the slave Bible. Because that may make a slave say, wait. How do you say that slaves are to be good to their masters, whether they're cruel or not? But yet over here you say that in Christ no man is slave, but you want me to be a Christian. See, that don't work together. Either we free or we not free. Either I'm supposed to be a slave and be happy with my lot in life, just as Joseph was, or tell me the story. Which one am I supposed to be? Now also you have to recognize that it also left out the fact that even though it talks about Joseph, it didn't talk about Moses taking the children of Israel out of Egypt and keeping them free. And there's something significant about Moses' portion of that story and the 3 Hebrew boys. And that's where I want to go in right here. And this is why 1804, the Haitian Revolution, is connected in this way and why they were fearful of those stories. Because if you look at the Haitian Revolution and how it got started and what inspired them to continue to win and defeat the most powerful armies in the world at that time. We talk about the British, the Spanish, the Americans, the Canadians, what caused them to defeat them? It is this same message that you can gain from understanding the Exodus story of Moses as well as the 3 Hebrew boys. And those stories could not have been told because that is what happened in 1804 with the Haitian Revolution, and they killed all the white people. Just being plain and clear, that's what happened. Now, here's the thing. What is it? Now, Moses' story, a little bit significant. 3 Hebrew boys, incredibly significant. And I was going to do an entire video just on this, the Hebrew boys, and how that story relates to 1804. But I'm going to make it quick here. I want to be done in like 5 minutes. The Moses story. What's significant about that connects to the 1804 story? Well, in the Moses story, you have people who were in captivity. They were living as the Egyptians. They were doing things as the Egyptians. They even began to worship as the Egyptians. But when Moses came in, he came in as a reluctant leader, which the Haitian leader, I think it's Troussat, was a reluctant leader at first. Came in as a reluctant leader and told the people and reminded the people who they were. The whole I am is to remind them who they were, who their God was. And when they reminded them of who their God was, which was different from their oppressor, the people were freed and walked out of Egypt, and then 40 years in the wilderness and that sort of thing. But they had to remember who they were, who their God was, in order for their freedom to happen and for their God to reign over the Egyptian gods. That's first. Follow the connection, right? 1804. The Haitians, the slaves in Haiti, revolted after they first put down the Christian God and went back to their African ancestry. And then they revolted after performing rituals that we nowadays call voodoo or voodoo, and they went back to their orishas and they defeated the most powerful armies of the day in the same way with Moses. Now, how is that connected to the Hebrew boys? It's even more so with them. You have a story of Nebuchadnezzar building a statue, saying, hey, worship my statue because I'm the man, and what Daniel said hadn't happened, so I only think Daniel was right. So come and worship. The 3 Hebrew boys didn't do it. They didn't bow down. They didn't worship. And so what did he do? He threw them into the fire. He gave them out, I'm going to throw you in this fire, so you better bow down. And he said, they was like, nah, do whatever you want to do. We're going to stick to our God. And our God, either whether he delivers us or our God doesn't deliver us, it doesn't matter. We're sticking to our God. And what they do, they throw them into the furnace. All the elements of the ropes burn off, the elements of chain, the elements of oppression burnt off of them in that fire, but yet they remain unburned. Come with me. All the elements of their oppressors burned off of them, but they remain unburned. And then they were there with their God or an angel. People, if you're Hebrew, then it was with an angel. If you're Christian, then people insert it was Jesus. Nobody really knows, to be honest, because the word that's used there, go look up the word that's used there, and it really is more like angel or God. It's not, so go there. So anyway, Research that yourself. But it burned out. And then Nebuchadnezzar respected their God. He didn't convert. I always found that interesting. That if I had seen that, I might have converted. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't convert after that, nor did he convert the king. He just said, anybody speak ill against their God, yeah, I'm going to burn you down, because they got a powerful God. But everybody kept their own God. Now, there's a lot more I can unpack about that story, about how, you got to follow your pathway to God. You got to stick with your pathway to God, whatever it is, however it is. I don't care what it is, but whatever gets you connected with your own inner divinity that connects you to the kingdom around you, has a whole message in there about doing you and staying connected your way, regardless of what everybody else is doing. But in the 1804 situation, they went back to their God. They went back to their orishas. They went back to what they were taught from the motherland, from Africa, from the families that they came from, because they remembered who they were. And when they remembered who they were, because you got to think, and the Caribbean was where most slaves didn't go to America. Most slaves went to the Caribbean and to South America. So they were constantly getting people from home who were still speaking of their orishas, still speaking of their Anansi and Ogun and Oshun. I said Ogun. But they're still speaking of them. They were still talking that. So when these people, when they got ready to revolt, they went back to that. They went back to what they knew, what grandmama and them had taught them, what great-grandmama and them had taught them. They went back to that. And by being inspired by that in their faith, they conquered and they won on this little bitty island. They maintained and defeated people until they gained their freedom. And I know many people say, well, they messed up now. Yeah, the world has been punishing Haiti ever since, through economics and through military and through political slavery. They've been punishing them ever since. But this is what happens, in history. It keeps repeating itself. The moment you start to realize who you are and you demand your freedom, you demand equal treatment, then those in power are going to try to punish you in the same way as Haiti did. But you got to stand strong. That's the story of those three Hebrew boys. That's the story of 1804. Standing strong on your faith, on what you believe, how you live, what gets you closer to your creator, your divinity. That's what matters most. And letting all the oppressors' shackles burn off of you, fall off of you. Whatever it is you got to do, standing strong. That's what happened. That's why the slave Bible doesn't have those in there. They don't have those stories. And it was centered in that portion of the world, in the Caribbean, to make sure that nobody else read that. Because if they realize that, then they can disrupt the power flow. This is why 1807 became such a vital year, because they said, no, we can't keep letting that information, that knowledge, that mode of being keep coming into America. Because if they hear about what happened in Haiti, if they see some of these other, we already got some slave revolts happening. We already got, Nat Turner. We already got the revolt in the Louisiana revolt, New Orleans revolt. We already have some of these revolts. We already got slaves hiding and running and fighting in the Seminole Wars. We already having all these issues already. We're not going to keep bringing more over, because if we bring too many over, they may outnumber us one day. They may, and if they outnumber us and they go back to their orishas, then we are doomed to fall just as Haiti fell. So they had to stop that. The Jamaicans had to stop that. Can't let that continue in Jamaica. Can't let that continue in Antigua. Can't let it happen in Barbados. Can't let it happen in the Amazon. They were already having issues in the Amazon with allowing, when the slaves would run away, they would go into the Amazon, and they had whole towns within the Amazon rainforest where they lived free, and they fought against the Portuguese constantly, consistently. So they had to find a way to shut that down. So one of the ways was to create this slave Bible. We don't know who wrote it, but that was one of the ways, and to redact it like nobody's business. And some people will call it the unholy. Those who are still follow a doctrine, they call it the unholy Bible. And yeah, that one is unholy. But that's what they call it, because it took out so much. So much of it was. But I would say this in thought. If they can change one and have it from 1807 and hold it and keep it for 50 plus years, think about it. There are people who would have been born and would have died, and that would have been what they thought is the Word of God. We don't know how long people kept reading it. but just using America's Civil War time frame. You got whole generations who read it, believed it a certain way, a certain doctrine of it. And that was what they believed and held on to say that's the word of God. And you couldn't tell them differently because that's what they were given. So this book was written in 1807 to make sure that they were taught what their oppressors wanted them to teach, wanted them to know. And in the same way, there were verses that were restricted in America for slaves to be able to teach other slaves, to read, to talk about, to discuss those types of stories. It was emphasized, and the Bible was used to justify all of American slavery. And yes, some people will say that the abolitionists used the Bible to justify, to say that slavery was wrong, and that Abraham Lincoln was one of those. But let's really look at him. Abraham Lincoln also, in the courtroom when he was defending the Brown law, Brown rule, used the Bible to justify slavery. He also said that if he could have kept the Union together without freeing one slave, he would have done that. So we have to realize there's a political side of all of these things. There are cultural sides of all these things. All these manuscripts are written at time frames and then justified by each group in order to maintain their power and their control. My question to you is that what are you reading? What are you studying? What are you utilizing? What are you doing that's giving you back your control? Now, if you can take a Bible, a Quran, a Torah, a Vedic, a Bhagavad Gita, and use that for you to be able to burn off the shackles that hold you down, that keeps you oppressed, then use that book. I have no problems with you using any of those books. Don't use it as a form of oppression to hold someone else down, though. That's the next level of it. Don't say, I may use it to free myself, but I'm going to use it to hold this person down. I'm going to use it to talk this person down. Many Hebrew Israelites use the exact same Bible that people use to hold black people down in slavery, to say that they're going to use the same one to be able to rape and pillage and murder white people. That's not right. That can't be of a loving God. It cannot be. This is why we get hung up sometimes on the letter of things, but we forget about the spirit of things. If I had to take only one thing from the Christian Bible and make everybody understand it, make everybody learn it, make everybody live by it, it would be to love God, especially the one inside yourself, and to love your neighbors and to do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. Because through this understanding, all the law hangs upon. Meaning that you can know all the legalistic stuff you want. You can say you're saved by this, you're saved by that, you're saved by everything in creation. But at the end of the day, all those legalistic things matter not, means nothing. What titles you call yourself, who you call, when the J was invented, what the Ius name, whatever name, how many steps you're supposed to take, all those things don't matter if you don't treat other people as the way you would want to treat yourself. See, here's the thing. If you love yourself, would you treat yourself, if you love yourself and you treated other people the same way, would you beat another person? Would you make another person a slave? Would you treat people differently because of their race? Would you treat women, foul because they're a woman and you're a man? Would you treat somebody poorly because of a nationality or a creed or a sexual preference? You wouldn't, because you wouldn't want anybody treating you that way. You wouldn't want people to treat you badly because you're heterosexual. You wouldn't want people treating you badly because you're a man. You wouldn't want people treating you badly because you're an American. You know how many times I was in Europe and Americans got pissed because people treated them poorly because they was American? You wouldn't want that for yourself, so stop doing it to other people. So if there was only one thing I could teach you from the Bible, that would be the one thing that I would teach you. And I can find the same thing in the Vedas. I can find the same things in the Bhagavad Gita, the same thing in the Tao, the same thing in the in the hieroglyphics, in the meta-netras, and the same thing in the Book of the Dead. The same thing is everywhere. That same message is everywhere. Treat others how you would treat yourself. Love your neighbors as you would love yourself. It's all over the place. If we can learn how to do that, then the world would be a much better place. You wouldn't be walking around with all this stress killing yourselves. We wouldn't be murdering each other. We wouldn't have all these problems if we all did that. So, but of course, 1804, 1807, political, mental, economic reasons, people aren't that way, but we can start being that way. We can work on it. We can move in that direction. We can learn how to be that. And then all these other differences that we have, if they all hinged on treating other people how we treat ourselves, if every law was based on treating other people how we treat ourselves, then even our laws would be much better, and we wouldn't have as many. We wouldn't even need law. To be honest, we wouldn't even need law. That's the bigger message. Think about that. You wouldn't need law if you treated everybody like you treat yourself, because if everybody treated everybody like they're treating themselves, there would be no need of a law that said do not steal. Because you don't want to be stolen from, so you wouldn't steal. And if everybody was that way, then there would be no such thing as theft. There wouldn't be no such thing as murder. There would be no such thing, as bribery. There would be no such thing as rape. There would be no such thing as any of those things if that was the case. But there is. Why? Because we don't know that. And every religion teaches it, and every morality teaches it. So I don't know what the problem is. I don't know why we do that and don't. We are just in a corrupt situation, but we can change it. We can change it because we can decide who we want to be and how we want to be. So y'all have a great day. And remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable.